Elias had been living on the colony world for almost 3 years, and in that time, he had learned that silence could be heavier than stone. Out on the edge of human space, neighbors were far apart. The nights were endless, and the wide fields stretched so far that they made a man feel small. He had chosen this life for peace, for distance, and maybe for escape, but peace often turned into loneliness. His home was a simple farmhouse made of steel walls and reinforced glass. He had work every day, repairing machines, tending the crops, checking the water lines. The agency provided workers sometimes, but most of them came and went quickly. Then one day they sent him someone different, an alien maid. Her name was Sirene. When Elias first saw her, he did not know what to say. She was taller than him, her frame lean but strong, her skin pale silver like moonlight poured over metal. Her eyes were strange, clear, glass-like pools that caught every bit of light and held it. She wore the uniform of service, plain, clean, and without decoration. She bowed her head, waiting for orders. At first, Elias treated her like any worker. She cleaned the house, prepared food, fixed small things with surprising skill. She moved quietly, almost too quietly, as if trying not to exist. When she walked through the rooms, her footsteps were softer than whispers. Elias noticed that she never looked him in the eye for more than a second. If he spoke to her, she answered politely but with short words. If he tried to thank her, she only lowered her head. She never laughed, never frowned, never showed anger. She was a presence without noise, a shadow with hands that worked carefully and endlessly. And yet, something about her made the house feel less empty. Before Sirene, Elias would eat alone, the clinking of cutlery echoing in the wide, silent kitchen. After Sirene came, the silence remained, but it felt different. He would sit at the table, and she would move around the room, placing dishes, cleaning surfaces, her silver skin glowing softly in the lamplight. It was like having a song without words, a rhythm he could not explain. Still, Elias could not ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Sirene's silence was not just the silence of someone quiet. It was heavier, like she was carrying something she could not put down. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, he caught her standing very still, her hands frozen in the air, her glass-like eyes far away. She looked like someone staring through walls into a place he could not see. Elias tried once to ask about her. "You've been here for weeks," he said gently one evening. "Do you like it here?" Sirene lowered her head. "I serve as required." "That's not what I asked." She hesitated. For a moment, her lips trembled as if she wanted to say something else, but then the mask returned. She bowed slightly and said, "The house is in order. That is what matters." Elias sighed, letting it go. He was not a man who pushed too hard. He had learned that out on the frontier. Pushing too much only made things break. But inside, the questions grew. Who was she really? Where had she come from? Why did her voice sometimes sound like someone choking down words they wanted to release? At night, Elias sat by the window watching the stars. He told himself he did not need to know. She was just a maid, just another worker sent by the agency. Her life was her own. And yet he could not stop thinking of the way her hands sometimes shook when she thought no one was watching, or the way her eyes glistened as if holding back something heavy. The colony was a place of contracts and rules. Aliens like Sirene worked under agreements humans rarely questioned. Elias had signed the papers without reading much. It was easier that way. But now, as he watched her move silently through the house, he wondered if those papers carried more weight than he wanted to admit. There was something fragile about Sirene, something hidden beneath her quiet. And though Elias didn't know it yet, the day would soon come when that fragile mask would break. And when it did, nothing in his life would remain the same. The days passed quietly in Elias's home. Sirene worked with the same calm rhythm every morning, every evening, as if she were made of clockwork. Elias tried to ignore his curiosity, but it grew like roots in his chest. The silence she carried was too deep, too heavy. One night, the answer finally came, but not in the way he expected. Elias had finished repairing the irrigation lines early. The sky above the fields was painted with streaks of orange, the last of the sun sinking beyond the horizon. Normally he would return home after dark, but that day, his work ended sooner. He walked back through the quiet farmland, boots crunching on the gravel path, the chill of night slowly rising. When he opened the door of his farmhouse, the air inside was different. Not wrong, but tense. There was no sound of cooking, no quiet movement of dishes or tools. The house was still. Too still. "Seren?" he called softly. No answer. He walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing louder than usual. Then he saw her. Seren stood near the far end of the hallway, her back slightly turned. In her hands, she held something glowing faintly blue. It wasn't like any tool he had seen before. The light pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. She stared down at it, her glass-like eyes filled with something Elias had never seen before: longing, pain, and a fragile kind of hope. She didn't hear him approach. Not until the old wooden floor creaked under his step. Her head snapped up instantly. Her hands trembled. The glowing device slipped from her grasp and fell to the ground with a sharp metallic clatter. The light dimmed, flickered, but did not die. Elias froze where he stood staring. Serene's face, always calm, always distant, was pale with fear. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. She looked like a bird cornered in a cage. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Please, don't." Elias looked at her, then at the object lying on the floor between them. He had never seen her like this, shaking, fragile, almost desperate. He bent slowly, carefully, and picked it up. The device was small, no larger than his palm, with smooth curves and faint markings across its surface. It hummed softly like a living thing. "What is this?" he asked gently. Seren took a half-step forward, her hands rising as if to reach for it, then froze. Her breath came fast, too fast. Her entire body trembled. You must not touch it," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and Elias realized this was the first time he had heard her sound anything other than calm. He saw something in her eyes now, a storm she had been holding back for too long. "Seren," he said softly, still holding the device. "Why? What is it?" She shook her head violently. "You cannot know. If you know, then they will take it. They will take everything from me." Elias's chest tightened. He had no idea who they were, but the way she said it chilled him. He stepped closer, lowering the device, showing her that he wasn't threatening her. "I'm not here to take it," he said quietly. "But you have to tell me, Seren. You've been carrying something heavy since the day you came here. What are you hiding?" Her knees weakened. She staggered slightly, pressing her back against the wall, as if her legs could no longer hold her up. The glass of her eyes shimmered, tears forming at the edges but refusing to fall. I cannot say," she breathed. "I am bound. If I speak, if they know, I will lose the only piece of them I have left." Her voice broke completely then, and her whole body shook with the weight of the words. For a moment, Elias thought she would collapse. He reached out, instinctively, and caught her by the shoulders before she could slide to the floor. Her skin was cool, almost metallic, but trembling like a frightened child's. For the first time, Seren did not pull away. She let herself lean against him, her breath shallow, her heart, or whatever beat inside her chest, pounding fast against his arm. Elias held her carefully, his mind racing, his heart heavier than it had ever felt. He didn't understand everything yet, but one thing was clear. Seren's silence had not been emptiness. It had been survival. And now, by accident, he had stepped into the truth she could no longer keep hidden. Elias stood in the quiet hallway, holding Seren as if she might fall apart at any moment. Her body shook, and for the first time he felt just how fragile she truly was. The silver skin that had always seemed unbreakable now seemed thin, vulnerable. He could feel the weight of her fear pressing against him like a living thing. "Seren," he said gently, "you don't have to be afraid of me." But her eyes told him otherwise. They were wide, shimmering with tears, and filled with the kind of fear that had been carved deep over years, not days. She had spent so long hiding it that now, when it slipped through, she seemed almost ashamed. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she trembled harder, her breath sharp and uneven. Elias could see she was fighting something inside, a chain around her heart that kept pulling her back into silence. "I don't want to hurt you," Elias whispered. "I just want to understand." Her body stiffened in his arms. Slowly, painfully, she pulled herself upright, though her legs shook beneath her. She tried to step back, but Elias could see she had no strength left. "You cannot understand," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "You are human. You are free. She stopped, swallowing the rest of her words. Elias reached for her hand without thinking. She flinched at first, but didn't pull away. Her hand was cold, trembling, but he held it firmly, like anchoring her to the ground. "Then help me understand," he said softly. For a long moment, Seren only stared at him. Her glass-like eyes reflected his face, tired and lined with years of quiet labor. She searched him as though trying to decide if he was safe, if he could carry the truth she had carried alone for so long. Her lips trembled again. Finally, in a voice so small it almost broke, she whispered, "If I speak, I will be punished. If I speak, they will take everything from me. I cannot." Her words hit Elias harder than any blow. Punished, taken. Who were they? What kind of system had chained her so tightly that even the thought of speaking brought terror? Elias wanted to press her for answers, but the look in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't just fear, it was despair, a deep wound he could not heal with simple questions. "Then don't speak," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "Not yet, just let me help you carry it. You don't have to do this alone anymore." Seren blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold back more tears. Her shoulders shook, and finally she sank down against the wall, sliding to the floor. Elias crouched beside her, still holding the strange glowing device in his other hand. She stared at it with longing so raw it made Elias's chest ache. Her hands twitched as though she wanted to grab it, but she stopped herself, as if even touching it again would betray her. Elias studied it for a moment. The soft blue glow pulsed gently, almost like it was alive. He had no idea what it was, but he knew it mattered to her more than anything. "Seren," he said carefully, "this isn't just a tool, is it?" Her head lowered. Her voice was barely audible. "It is a memory," Elias frowned. "A memory?" Her lips pressed together tightly, as if she had already said too much. But he had caught the truth in her eyes. Whatever this device was, it wasn't dangerous to him. It was dangerous only because it was forbidden. Silence filled the hall again, heavy and fragile. Elias could hear the faint hum of the device, the uneven rhythm of Seren's breathing and the pounding of his own heart. At last, Seren whispered, "Please, give it back. I will hide it. You never saw it, please." Elias looked at her trembling form, at the desperate way she begged. She wasn't asking out of anger or greed. She was asking because she was terrified of losing the only piece of herself that remained unbroken. He placed the device gently in her hands. Her fingers curled around it instantly, cradling it close to her chest like it was life itself. "Thank you," she whispered, tears slipping down her silver cheeks. Elias nodded slowly, his throat tight. He didn't know what he had just stepped into, but he knew one thing for certain. Seren was no longer just his maid. She was someone chained, someone in pain, and somehow, without meaning to, he had become part of her struggle, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what that meant. After the hallway incident, the house was quieter than ever. Elias had given Seren space, but he had not left her alone. He stayed nearby, silently watching, letting her know he was present without pushing her. For the first time, he realized that patience was more important than questions. Some things only came when the person was ready. Seren sat on the floor, the small glowing device clutched tightly to her chest. The light from it reflected softly on her silver skin, giving her an almost ethereal glow. She hadn't spoken much since that night. She only stared at the floor, her thoughts hidden behind glass-like eyes. Elias knew she was struggling, carrying a weight too heavy for any being to bear alone. Finally, after hours of silence, she spoke. Her voice was barely audible, trembling like wind over fragile leaves. I cannot stay silent any longer," she whispered. Elias knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on the floor near hers, giving her the choice to reach out or not. Her eyes met his, filled with fear, yet also something else. Hope, fragile but shining. She took a shaky breath. I am not just a maid. I never was. I was someone else before I came here. Someone with a family, a home, a life they cannot take away except by force. Elias nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. It's okay, he said softly. I'm listening. Her lips trembled. I was sold into service. The agency. They brought my people here. They made promises, but they were lies. I had no choice. I had to come. I had to work. My life was no longer mine. Elias's chest tightened. He had known life on the colony was harsh, but he had never imagined this. Someone stolen from their world, bound into labor, forced to hide even memories of family. She pressed the glowing device closer. This is all I have left. A memory core from my home. It contains the voices of those I love. My parents, my siblings. I smuggled it past the overseers. If they find it, they will erase everything. They will erase me too. Her voice cracked and tears streamed down her cheeks, leaving silver streaks that caught the dim light. Elias wanted to reach out and hold her, but he waited. He knew now that this was not a thing to be taken or fixed. This was her story, her burden, and she was choosing to share it. I could never speak of it before, she continued. Even to you, even when I wanted to trust someone. I have been afraid for so long. Afraid they would punish me, take this away. Take everything. I have lived in silence because silence was the only way to survive. Her voice shook with the weight of years. Elias felt a tightness in his chest he had never felt before. Anger, sorrow, and an urgent need to protect someone who had never been free. And yet, she said, her whisper barely above the floor's creaks, I think I want to be free. But freedom is dangerous for me. If they know I tried, I could never return. I could never see them again. My people, my family. She trailed off, her hands shaking as she pressed the device closer to her chest, almost as if holding it could hold back the world itself. Elias gently touched her shoulder. Seren, he said softly, you're not alone anymore. You don't have to hide from me. Not from me. Not anymore. For a moment she stiffened, as if the words themselves were chains she had never learned to break. Then slowly, she allowed herself to lean against him, resting her head on his arm. Her tears fell freely now, the floodgates of years finally breaking open. Elias didn't say anything. He let her cry, letting the silence fill the house with a new kind of warmth. The weight she had carried alone for so long had begun to shift, just enough that he could feel it. She whispered again, her voice hoarse, but softer now. I wanted to protect this, to survive. I never thought anyone would understand. I never thought anyone could help. You don't have to survive alone, Elias said gently. You won't have to anymore. The small glow of the device reflected in his eyes. For the first time, Seren allowed herself to imagine a life where she was not just a servant, not just a shadow in the house, but someone with choice, someone with hope. And though the path ahead was uncertain, though danger and fear still loomed over her life, the truth had finally begun to break free. It was the first step toward freedom. Elias could not sleep that night. He sat by the small window of his bedroom, staring at the dark expanse of the colony fields. The stars shone cold and distant above, and the wind whispered through the metallic edges of his farmhouse. He thought about Seren. He thought about her trembling hands, the glass-like eyes filled with fear, and the small device she clutched like a lifeline. He had grown up hearing stories about the frontier colonies, about survival and independence. But never had he imagined that someone could be trapped in a cage so invisible, so complete, that even breathing freely felt like a crime. He felt a storm inside him, anger, frustration, and an overwhelming desire to act. The agency had rules. The contracts were supposedly ironclad. Aliens like Seren were property, legally bound to serve, their past erased or ignored. And yet Elias could not reconcile this law with the life he had just glimpsed. The life of a being forced into silence, carrying the memories of a family stolen from her. Elias finally stood, pacing the floor. He had a choice. He could ignore it, let things continue as they had, and return to his lonely, ordered life. Or he could do something, risk everything, and try to give her the freedom she had never known. His hands clenched. He knew it was dangerous. If the agency discovered what he planned, He could lose his home, his status, maybe even his life. But when he thought of Seren's trembling form, the way she had leaned against him like a frightened child, he could not turn away. Morning came slowly, pale light spilling into the house. Seren was already awake, sitting quietly in the kitchen, the small blue glow of the device cradled in her lap. Her eyes flicked toward him as he entered, careful not to meet them too directly. "Good morning," he said softly. She nodded, her expression unreadable, yet her hands tightened around the device when he walked closer. Elias took a deep breath. "Seren," he began, "I know what they've done to you. I know what you've been carrying alone." She looked at him, the faintest flicker of hope in her eyes. "I can't undo everything," he admitted. "I can't give you back the years you lost or the home they stole. But I can try. I can try to set you free from this contract. I will risk whatever it takes." Her eyes widened, disbelief mingling with fear. You would risk?" "For me?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because no one deserves chains. Not you, not anyone. I won't let them control your life any longer." Tears threatened again, but she blinked them back. "But the agency, they are powerful. You could lose everything." You could," Elias smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I've already lost enough by standing by. I'd rather fight for what's right than live with the knowledge that I could have helped and did nothing." Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. Then Seren did something she had never done before. She reached out and took his hand. It was small, trembling, but firm enough to let him feel the weight of her trust. I don't know if I can believe it yet," she whispered, voice trembling. "I've been alone for so long. I've carried this fear like a shield." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "You won't have to carry it alone anymore." For the first time in her life, Seren allowed herself to imagine a future where she was not just a servant, not just a shadow moving through someone else's home. She imagined sunlight without fear, laughter without hiding, and a voice that could speak freely without punishment. Elias's choice was simple, though the consequences were not. He would face the system, the rules, the people who had bound her for years. But he did not hesitate. He could not. When a life was in chains and you held the key, even just a small part of it, you could not turn away. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of purpose he had never felt before. "We'll start tomorrow," he said softly. "I'll help you reclaim your freedom step by step." Seren nodded, tears finally falling freely now. She pressed the device to her chest and leaned slightly toward him, a gesture so small but filled with trust. And in that moment, Elias understood something he had never realized before. Humanity was not just about survival. It was about courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand for someone who could not stand for themselves. For both of them, the world would never be the same again. The next morning, Elias woke before dawn. The stars were fading in the pale light of the colony sun, and a thin mist hung over the fields. He moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Seren, though he already knew she was awake. He had seen her sitting by the window, the blue glow of the memory device illuminating her silver skin. Her eyes were wide, alert, almost fearful, but there was also a spark he had never seen before. Elias had spent the night planning. He had accessed the colony's records from his small terminal, digging into contracts and regulations. The agency's rules were complicated, layered with bureaucracy and hidden loopholes meant to trap beings like Seren forever. But Elias was determined. He had learned enough to know that even the strongest chains could be broken with the right knowledge and courage. When Seren came to the kitchen for breakfast, Elias was ready. He didn't speak immediately, just handed her a small cup of warm tea. She accepted it with a nod, her hands shaking slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Are you ready?" he asked finally, voice low. She hesitated. Her glass-like eyes searched his, uncertain. I don't know," she whispered. "What if they punish you?" Elias smiled faintly. "Then we will face it together. I cannot stand by while you remain a shadow. Not anymore." Her breath hitched, and for the first time he saw tears glisten in her eyes. Slowly, she nodded. "Then, let's do it." The work was painstaking. Elias navigated the colony's records, bypassing security protocols and carefully erasing the digital signatures that bound her. Every line of code, every clause in the contract he altered carried a weight heavier than any tool he had ever lifted. But with every deletion, Elias felt the chains loosen, felt Seren's silent relief building like a tide inside her. Meanwhile, Seren stayed close, watching, offering the occasional word or piece of information he needed. She moved differently now, not a silent maid but a partner, fragile but brave. Her shoulders no longer carried the same invisible weight. Her hands shook less and her breaths came steadier. Hours passed. Sweat rolled down Elias's brow and his fingers ached from the endless typing. Yet when he finally hit the final command, wiping the last trace of the agency's hold over her, he leaned back and exhaled deeply. "Done," he said softly. Seren froze, staring at him, then at the glowing device in her hands. Her lips trembled and she pressed it to her chest. I'm free?" she whispered, voice barely audible. Elias nodded. "You are. No contracts, no overseers, no chains. Your past is yours again and your future is your own." Tears streamed down her silver cheeks, and for the first time, she laughed softly at first, then louder, the sound filling the small kitchen and spilling into the house like sunlight breaking through clouds. Elias watched her, a strange mixture of relief, pride, and awe swelling in his chest. He had seen many things in his life: machines break, storms tear through fields, colonies fail, but nothing compared to seeing someone finally unburdened, finally free. Seren's eyes met his, shimmering and unsteady. I don't know how to thank you," she said, voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to," Elias replied. "Just live. That's all I ask." For the first time, Seren allowed herself to imagine life without fear. She could speak freely, laugh openly, and move without looking over her shoulder. She could reclaim her memories, share her stories, and breathe without carrying invisible chains. And yet she also realized something else. Elias had risked everything for her. Not for duty, not for reward, but simply because he recognized her worth, her humanity. That realization made the freedom even sweeter, even more profound. They stood together in the kitchen, side by side. The memory device glowed softly between them, a symbol of everything she had carried and survived. Elias didn't speak, but his presence alone said enough. You are safe. You are seen. You are free. For the first time in her life, Seren believed it. And with that belief, she began to step into a future of her own choosing. A future where fear no longer ruled her, and where humanity in its best form had shown her what courage, kindness, and compassion truly meant. The chains were broken, and the dawn of a new life had begun. The sun rose slowly over the colony, painting the fields with soft gold light. For the first time in years, the house did not feel heavy with silence or fear. The air was different, lighter, warmer, full of possibility. Seren moved through the kitchen with quiet grace, but her steps were free now, not weighed down by invisible chains. She hummed softly, a song she had remembered from her home world, a melody she had almost forgotten. Elias watched her from the doorway, leaning against the frame. The sight of her, alive and unburdened, made his chest ache with a strange mix of joy and pride. He had never expected that helping someone could feel so powerful, so moving. In his years on the frontier, he had repaired machines, fixed water systems, and survived storms. But nothing had compared to the human act of giving freedom to another being. Seren turned to him, a smile touching her lips for the first time that he had ever seen. It was small, fragile, but it held a strength he could feel. I never thought I could feel this," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Free, without fear, it is more than I imagined." Elias stepped closer. "You earned it, Seren. You survived. You carried more than anyone should, and now, you can choose your own path." Her eyes shone, reflecting the sunlight and the glow of the device she still held carefully in her hands. "And you," she said softly. "You chose to stand with me. You risked everything for someone else's freedom. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Elias replied, smiling. "Just live. That's enough for me." For the first time, Seren felt the world stretch wide around her, unbounded by fear or contracts. She stepped outside, the grass soft beneath her feet, the wind brushing over her skin like a gentle reminder of life's possibilities. The fields were endless, and the horizon seemed to promise that nothing could hold her back anymore. Elias followed, watching her with a sense of wonder. They walked together side by side, and for a moment, the distance between alien and human disappeared entirely. She was no longer a servant. She was no longer silent. She was simply Seren, a being with thoughts, feelings, and a voice that mattered. "I can tell my story now," she said softly. "I can speak of my home, my people, the life I lost, and the life I am beginning again. And maybe others will hear it too." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Freedom was not just the absence of chains, it was the ability to speak, to share, to be seen. And she would be seen now. As the days passed, Seren began to reclaim her life fully. She laughed freely, sang songs of her world, and told Elias stories that filled the house with warmth and life. She explored the fields, learned more about the colony, and even helped others who had been quietly trapped by rules and contracts, sharing her knowledge and her courage. Elias watched her transformation, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Humanity, he realized, was not only about strength or survival, it was about the courage to see injustice, the will to act, and the compassion to fight for someone who could not fight for themselves. In that, he had learned something greater than any skill or survival tactic the frontier had ever taught him. One morning, as the sun rose higher and painted the house in gold, Seren turned to him. Her eyes were bright, filled with gratitude, strength, and warmth. "Thank you," she said simply, but the words carried the weight of her entire being. "Not just for freedom, but for showing me that someone can care even when it seems impossible." Elias smiled. "No need to thank me. You carried the heaviest part yourself. I just helped you set it down." They stood together in the morning light side by side. The device hummed softly in her hands, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been reclaimed. And for the first time in years, the house was not just a home, it was a place of life, hope, and belonging. Seren took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her skin, the warmth of the sun, and the freedom of choice stretching endlessly before her. Elias stood with her, silent but supportive, and together they watched as the horizon glowed with possibility. Freedom had been given, chains had been broken, and a new dawn had begun, not just for Seren but for them both. Humanity, he realized, was not in the stars or machines, but in the courage to stand for another. And in that courage, they found something greater than themselves: hope.